So the thumbnail to this video is an actor called Alan Ford, and Alan is from Stepney in the East End. Uh, Technically doesn't exist anymore. It's Tower Hamlets, but it's as East End as it comes. Um, and Alan Ford always plays that stereotypical East End villain, if you like. He was in Lock Stock. It's his voice as well. But yeah, sorry, I'm rambling on. Moral of the story is I'm 13 months into the research of Monic Prager, aka Mickey Duff. Um, I'm literally finished researching the next week or two. And before I started this book, before I, so the book is 4 chapters in my writing, and I've interviewed 50 people. I've interviewed a lot more than 50, but I'm using 50 for this book. One or two I couldn't put in. One for legal reasons. Another one for it kind of dawned on me the gentleman was probably quite unwell. From boxing years ago. Anyway, I've counted. I've interviewed. I've spoke to something like over 70 people in 13 months regarding Mickey Duff. For kind of quotes and even people who've kind of give me vital bits of information, but they weren't comfortable with being in the book, or they said, "Look, I know him. I knew him very well. I was this, I was that, and but just leave me out of it." But sorry. So my point to the thumbnail again is before I did this book in my head, Mickey Duff was um, more or less a real life bricktop, if you like. Um, I could just imagined him talking about saying to people, "Do you know what nemesis means?" and feeding to the pigs Herald, and I don't want any sugar in my tea. I'm sweet enough, and all that kind of thing. That's what was in my head, um, and that's what the British media run a narrative. Obviously, and I'm very pleased to say that um, he wasn't. He's certainly not a real life bricktop. And not everyone has been a fan of him in the book, but in a cutthroat business like boxing, that kind of testosterone Neanderthal world, if you like, um, you know, in the boxing industry, you tend to get a lot of people from the streets, um, your villainy, if you like, and please and thank you doesn't cut the mustard sometimes. So you need to be that kind of strong person, as Mickey Duff was, and he was a guy who wouldn't stand for someone taking liberties. But yeah, fascinating character. I actually, in my head, I should have finished this book. Um, Brian Clough's my next book, and I was due to start that last month because it was the 20th anniversary of Clough's death, and I told the BBC Tees I'd give him an interview. Anyway, I'm still here. Brian Clough's book will have to wait probably till after Christmas now. Uh, because I just keep going on, and this book was only supposed to be 30 people, then I went to 40, and then I got to about 44, 45, and I thought, you know what, soddy, I'm going to go to 50. Um, I've got 48 and 49 this week and 50 next week, and yeah, but my whole point to this video was I remember actually I used to have quite a bit to do with John Gardner. 2016, I spent a bit of time with John. He actually came and stayed over at my home. I did an evening with John Gardner. I met him a few times, and my foot in the door, if you like, was obviously he fought Paul Sykes for the British and the Commonwealth heavyweight title, which incidentally was on a Mickey Duff show. But I wasn't even an author then. I hadn't even released one book, and I mean, well, say it was my first book, but I hadn't released it. And back then, I was only going to write one Sykes book, and like all addicts, like all people who just get obsessed, if you like. Genius is obsession, isn't it? What is genius? Genius is obsession. And once I do something, I kick the ass out of it. Yeah, and I thought, well, I'll do a second book and Sykes, and then I thought, well, what do I do? Anyway, long story short, coming off. But I remember talking to John, and me and him sat and we watched the Paul Sykes fight with him in 1979 at Wembley Arena. And I remember asking him, just wanting to know loads of questions about Mickey Duff, and as I said, I wasn't even writing. I was just going to do one book, and certainly by the time this Mickey Duff book comes out, it'll be book 27. Brian Clough will be 28. But yeah, and I just remember asking him, kind of almost being obsessed, Mickey Duff this and Mickey Duff that, and getting the stories out of him. Of course, John was Ali's number one mandatory, and him and Mickey went over to. Excuse me, I've just finished the night shift. I'm knackered. Went to I can't remember where it was, somewhere in America, and they basically got X amount of money to stand aside and let Muhammad Ali fight. Was it Larry Holmes or Trevor Burbick? Anyway, because John was the official mandatory for the WBC, and I remember him telling me a story, and he said he had whatever money it was. There was £16,000 of British money. So this is 45 years ago. So bearing in mind now, that's probably going to be more than 100 grand. Um, and he had 16 grand in his bag, hold all, and he refused to buy a hotel room. That was what John said to me, and he said he slept on my floor. Yeah, lots of other tales, and for a guy who gets a lot of bad flack from the media. As I said, I've interviewed, I say 47. Well, spoke to over 70 people, but 47 chapters I've done with people. But I'm not going to name them, but I've actually sat with big, big names in British boxing. And one of them, like, I'm not going to mention him, I'm not going to, but he actually got really emotional. There's two who've done that I watched, but one was sat in front of me almost crying, just out of love and admiration for Mickey Duff. And yeah, so I did this book, took it on, walked into the story, if you like, met all the characters, a bit like the Paul Sykes ones, which being sound to be a film, a bit like the Lee Duffy ones. And, as the trolls say to me, one actually messaged me the other week, actually went, I'm going to expose you. I'm going to expose you. You're getting exposed. And I was like, anyway, I read the comments and he went, I'm going to expose you because you write books on people you've never met. Yeah. But anyway, so I've walked into the story, met many of the characters. Um, you know, Mickey Duff wasn't known in the media portrayed as for a guy who had a great deal of emotions. But I've interviewed people that when I'm listening to them, it's like Mickey looked after him like he looked after like a son, and that's several, and each fighter said, Mickey, uh, he made you feel special. He made you feel like you were his favorite, even though he had your Denzel Browns, your Billy Swears, your Henry Whartons, Duke McKenzie's. Yeah, I could go on all day really. He literally had the who's who. I never know how to pronounce this word, but creme de la creme or something. You get my point. He had the big names in British boxing, and he said, you know what? He said, I felt like I was a special one. And then I went on and I spoke to him and I spoke to Jim Watt and Barry McGuigan and all these elite level household names, um, regardless of what generation. And they said the same. But listening to, if you kind of Google that name now, Mickey Duff, um, you will be, if you kind of read, I've went back. I've actually I probably deeply researched this book more than them all because, I mean, obviously I'm kind of hugely uh, obsessed, maybe intrigued, captivated, whatever. But I've had the facilities to the archives for this project, so I've went and bearing in mind he was born in 1929. I've read articles from 1950 when he was like 21. And I've interviewed people for all levels. See, the thing with doing a book like this when you're interviewing people is you can't um, you can't strap a lie detector test to them. So whether they hate him or they love him, or you've got to do a little bit of homework in the background. If someone says so and so he did this, you've got to, it's box rec. But with this, I've kind of looked up. Not that I'm calling anyone a liar who I've interviewed, or saying that a lot of them have been old fighters and flat noses, and the memories haven't been as great as once upon a time. But I have kind of double checked a lot of things. But I've did my homework, and I think this book, it's 100,000 plus words. My biggest book has been something like 94,000 words, which was the Alan Thompson one. The average book in this genre is 70 to 80,000 words. Uh, yeah, this will be, I don't know, maybe 120,000. Who knows how long's a piece of string? But yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I've went out and I've interviewed referees, your Commonwealth champions, British champions, area champions, timekeepers, promoters, managers, boxing anoraks, boxing writers, Hall of Famers, several Hall of Famers actually, um, commentators, yeah, you name it. I've literally all levels, um, and best friends, literally, very, very close people to him, even to people who was at a coffee shop in Soho and he was there every day. So there's a bit, I'd like to think I've totally covered every angle with this book. Um, and it's going to be quite sad to leave him. Yeah, I find that once I do a book subject, a little bit of them stays with me. Um, yeah, particularly books like this, which I've got. Oh God, the dog's farted. I've got a Staffordshire Bull Terrier at my feet, so I come in from work, have a shower, and I've got a dog. Do you know, like the Rottweiler and the Orman sleeps at my feet, and he's just shooting farts out. But what was I saying? Um, you absolute animal. Yeah, what was I saying? So yeah, to do a book as long as I've done with this, I've got to like them. I've got to be obsessed. Um, and I use that word. I don't use it loosely. Obsessed, because what is obsession? Obsession, genius is obsession in one field. And you know, I I dare say I've probably researched the life and times of Mickey Duff more than anyone on the planet in the past year. Um, yeah, you know, some people said they'd speak to me. Some, some people told me they didn't want to speak ill of the dead. Some people have been a lot less polite. Some people have been a far worse, to put it mildly. But I've had a reaction, and it's tend to have been get stuffed or absolutely. So either way, that name, Monic Prager, aka Mickey Duff, it brings out huge emotion. And my plan for this is to put him right back in the limelight. I don't know. Listen, when I did the books on Paul Sykes in 2017, I never ever, when the publisher rang me and said, Jamie, Western Edge Pictures, I've read your book and they want to make a film on you, and I was like, sod. I didn't believe that for months, and yeah, I really think this is. I mean, I've actually reached out to an award-winning filmmaker who, I mean, I've been involved with 3 documentaries in the past, and I said, look, I want to do my 4th documentary on this guy. Let me release the book. Let me show you how the success off the back of it, and let's sit down and talk. I want to do a documentary, but I just think it's a matter of time before someone comes and does some kind of drama or Netflix series, or it's totally unique, total one off. And as so many people in this book have told me, there's only one Mickey Duff. There'll never be another Mickey Duff. There'll never be um, a proper boxing man again. I said in a video the other week, Barry Hearn, yes, he was boxing, but he was into snooker, he was into darts. Frank Warren, football mad, Arsenal fanatic, trying to buy Tottenham earlier this year. Mickey Duff was purely boxing, purely pugilism, purely just all about the noble art under the Queensberry rules. And yeah, it's going to be really sad to give up and uh, stop speaking to people. And I've got to read the book, proofread it 4 times, and then go on to Brian Clough, which I think I told you the other day. Colin Hart, the Hall of Famer, boxing boxing writer. He said to me, he said Mickey Duff was to British boxing what Brian Clough was to British football, and every bit as controversial. And I never told him I was writing a book on Brian Clough next. So yeah, that was quite um, surreal, quite ironic, if you like. But yeah, getting back to the thumbnail again. Listen, I know there's a lot of people. There's people out there who didn't like Mickey Duff, and there's some in this book. Um, but he was what he was, and overall, totally captivated. A totally unique individual. Um, and you think he grew up in Whitechapel, poor Polish immigrant, couldn't speak English when he arrived. The Nazis had, been trying to kill his family and all that kind of thing. I'm told he learned to speak English within a month. So he was obviously very naturally had a very skillful mind, did Mr. Duff. And that was the tragic thing. I remember John Rowland said to me, he said that was, very sad that lo and behold, that amazing mind that he had was what was laid low with Alzheimer's and dementia. But a lot of the old fighters have had that. One of the lasers got it. Brendan Ingle think got it. Roy Shaw, obviously boxing. Your hands are for that. They're not. To quote Mickey Duff, the brain isn't your chin; isn't meant to be punched by 200-pound athletes. As as much as we all love boxing, and it's a gentleman's sport, it's a noble art, it's a deadly business. It's a very unforgiving sport, and you don't get many chances. And sometimes a lot of people. I actually found some out of the archives, a Mickey Duff interview in '91. I think I've actually put it on YouTube, and he said I had 69 professional fights, and he said if I'm punch drunk, I'm not aware of it, and he said I would probably do it all over again. And then lo and behold, um, I think it was about 2009. It was obviously the last couple of years are bad, but very very sad, and that is kind of really what happened to him. But a lot of he got involved with boxing at a young age, and yeah, yeah, I just you'll never come across. I think those cans of like your Mickey Duffs, your Brendan Ingles, your Bobby Neals, your Ernie Fossey's, your Terry Lawless's, they're proper Tommy Miller's, proper boxing people. And I think they've all been replaced by people from from Kent and Essex in suits, who aren't really, I've written this in the book the other day. People talk about ex-fighters and promoters and all that, and Oscar De La Hoya, Audley Harrison, Ricky Hatton, Floyd Mayweather. The first person to do it, of course, was Mickey Duff, and a lot of people will say he had an accountant's heart, but he had pugilistic features. I know Jim Watt said to me, he said he would always kind of struggle putting his glasses on his nose, because obviously he had an incredibly pugilistic fighter's nose. So 123 amateur fights, 69 professional fights, and he did everything, didn't he? A manager, a promoter, a cornerman, a cutsman, literally everything. Everything in boxing, you name it, that guy did it. And yeah, I definitely think that the press have been pretty cruel. But then I read an article in the Boxing News about a month ago, and Steve Bunce, 2 page. Anyone who read Boxing News about a month ago, 2 pages, or maybe even been 3 pages, and the theory he gave out, the philosophical message was Mickey Duff was Bricktop. So it's stories like that. And what I've noticed was, so he actually was asked to write Mickey's biography, and he declined. Colin Hart declined as well. And the reason he said was he was just a nightmare to pin down. He was always on the phone. He was always chopping and flying all over the world and that. I did notice I was obviously I've relentlessly, um, obsessively, thoroughly, meticulously looked at everything, and I've looked at a lot of footage of on YouTube of Steve Bunce and Charlie Magri, and they won't even mention him. There's obviously bad vibes saying that he did bar Steve Bunce from his shows for 3 years. Um, and that was one of the articles last month. That's what it said. But I did notice whenever Steve Bunce and Charlie Magri were talking, they'll say Terry Lawless, but then when they need to mention Mickey Duff, they'll say Terry Lawless and his business partners. So, but then it's the likes of people like that, which I think is very disrespectful. Even Frank Warren, who Mickey sued, and I'm pretty sure Frank maybe possibly sued him. When he died in 2014, he had a very I spoke to a lovely lady, Melanie Lloyd, in the making of this book, and Frank would often be at the London ex boxers meetings, and he would only ever speak of Mickey Duff with great fondness. So I think there's a massive streak of bitterness in the boxing industry, um, and that kind of keeps that false narrative of villainy, East End gangster, which he wasn't. He was a straight law-abiding citizen, um, you know. But the media will portray that, and and I said, I mean, I'm really clued up on boxing, but half of me even thought that before I started this project. I half of me did think of that, and then obviously I've walked in the store, I've met all the people, and by now I have um, I have a really good image of who the real Monic Prager was. So before all you trolls, all these people say I didn't know him, the book next year, um, as I said, I didn't know him, but there'll be 50 people in it that did know him very, very well, and they'll all talk, and and there's a lot of humorous tales in this book. There's some very sad tales as well. Um, yeah, but ultimately and I'll leave you with this quote, which he put in his 99 biography. If I had my life all over again, I would do the exact same thing. And yeah, I just think boxing is a far less colourful place these days than losing your characters like your Mickey Duff and your Denny Mancini's and Brian Hughes from Manchester, and as they were proper boxing people, and yeah, it's not quite the same anymore. But yeah, Mickey Duff, what the media put out, take it with a pinch of salt, and just we have actually changed the name of the book. So I was going to call it The Little Big Man, and in my head at the time, excuse me, I hit again, sleep. In my head at the time, now I'm 5'8", which used to be not tall, not small. It was classed as average. These days, everyone's 6'8", 6'9". So apparently, 5'9" is the average height, which I'm not happy about because. But Mickey Duff, in my head, was 5'5", 5'6", 5'7", 5'6" at a push, and he was actually 5'10". I started looking at pictures, and Duke McKenzie was 5'7", and he was obviously a couple inches bigger than him. And Henry Wharton was 5'11", and Mickey was like an inch. And I've spoke to people really, really close. I spoke to Gary Prager, Mickey's son, who confirmed that he was actually 5'10". And but the media, one of the things that they will put on there is short guy, glasses, thick rim, flat nose, um, glistering forehead or whatever. All these kind of little things that they tag with him. And I called the book The Little Big Man. And yeah, you can't really someone who's 5'10". It's above, even when back in Mickey's era, 5'8" was the average height. So he's 2 inches above that. So the new name for the book is The Ringmaster, and that's been chosen by people close to Mickey. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Listen, the clues in the name, that's exactly what he was. But yeah, uh, an East End kind of villain, if you like. It's not a very accurate truth, but it adds glamour to the story, and it is interesting for people not really clued up. Oh, who's this guy? Oh, he was a bastard. And, oh, he must have been a monster, and he was horrible, and he was this, and he robbed everyone's money, and do you know what I mean? That's what the tend to will kind of string along. When, as I said, I've spoken to people who've sat in front of me and cried, and that's two people. Well, one and a half, two people. I've sat really getting filled up, um, and that's two people who spent 10 years with them as well, and trusted him with their lives and all the money and all this kind of thing. And one tale, I interviewed former British, Commonwealth, and European and world title challenger Gary Jacobs. And he had a fight over France, and I think the purse was something like X amount of money. Um, and he come back and he got paid, and it was his money and £21,000. And he was like, "Whoa!" And Mickey said, "Well, it was the French pound or the I don't know, foreign money or something like that. But basically, it was £21,000 more than what he would have thought, and he would never have known anything of that. So, if he was that much of a villain, if you like, he could have just kept that and no, he wouldn't have been any wiser to this day. But um, yeah, spoke to quite a few, and there's because a few times when I do put posts out, and I've got various social media things, 14 Facebook pages, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and I see the comments, and they're like, "Oh, he ripped this off, and he nicked this one's money, and all this," and I'm like, "There's just too many to it's like catching snow. I just do not have the time to bicker with everyone on social media, but." It's a very different story. I mean, these people are saying, "Oh, he's done this and he's nicked this one's money." These people have never met him. These people, these 50 people in the book, 50 chapters. There's more. There's a few quotes actually. Um, yeah, I've spoke to people from ESPN, um, three boxing writers from America, three Hall of Famers, four Hall of Famers, I think actually, because he was huge in America as well. And I personally think this book will be my biggest yet. It really will. I think every person in the world, or certainly in Britain, who has a fondness or love for boxing, um, and certainly who was around that golden era. So when I say the golden era, probably Mickey's peak, I'd say the mid to late 70s to the early 80s. That was when Alan Minter was fighting. Hagler was over in Wembley, and the Finnegan brothers, and it was a proper, Charlie Magri and all this, and obviously before my time, but that for me was the real golden age, if you like, for British boxing, and of course Mickey Duff was at the centre of it all. But yeah, just put a pin in your thoughts for now. Read the book, and yeah, an East End. Listen, he was an East Ender. Of course, he was, a Polish Jew, but very much a Cockney. Grew up from here, from 7 or 8 or something, and but to grow up in like Whitechapel, in fact, the technical term for Hanbury Street would be Spitalfields. Um, so that is really as Cockney as it come. Sound of the Bow Bells and all that, but yeah, I've been rudely awakened and hugely enlightened. And I've, a lot of things in my head before I started this book 13 months ago. I've been massively wrong. And, thank God I never put it in any books or spoke to anyone, because I would have really showed myself up, because I realized that although I knew who he was and what he was about, um, I didn't really know the man. I didn't really understand. I didn't thoroughly um, understand who he was and what he was about, and I think I do now, and I just hope this book does the guy's character justice, and yeah, I would love to see another book. Maybe one day someone close to Mickey would want to write one. I personally would love to read it. But yeah, a villain he certainly wasn't, but albeit one heck of a character.